Welcome everyone to beautiful Saudi Arabia. It is Michael here with Offshore Citizen, and today we are in the lovely Alula. So for those of you who have not been to Saudi Arabia, I think there's a lot of Western sort of bias against the Middle East in general, Saudi Arabia obviously being one of the more extreme examples of that. And so, good to challenge those beliefs and assumptions and to check out some new places. I would generally say that at this point in time in the world, and some people may be surprised to hear me say this, this is perhaps the best place to be a tourist. So what do I mean by that? Well, there are lots of beautiful places in the world, okay? Tons and tons of beautiful places. For example, you could go to Italy or south of France or Paris or Barcelona or like a bunch of these places. Beautiful places. I love these places. I like to spend time there in the summer, etc. But here's the problem with those places at this point in time. They're overwhelmed by tourists. Similar sort of thing. I mean, you can see the backdrop around me. I mean, this is just like really stunning nature. You could get something kind of similar if you were to go to Sedona, if you were to go to the Grand Canyon. Various other different areas of Arizona have kind of a similar geographic feel. And certainly there's lots of beautiful national parks in the US, etc. But what do all of those places have in common? They're overrun by tourists. And this creates all sorts of disruptions that are not so appealing, starting with the fact that crowds are just not that pleasant. Oftentimes you have to book long in advance to be able to get access to places, etc., etc. Now there's another set of places you could go to, for example, Central Asia. I've been getting lots of ads for Kyrgyzstan lately. I've mentioned before that Azerbaijan is really wonderful in a lot of regards, etc. These places are also beautiful. But the issue there is that the infrastructure typically is not that good. So things are just not so developed. If you're here, what do? You get a lack of tourists. Like, it's very calm, very peaceful, very wonderful. And so that's great. Service is fantastic. People are super hospitable. But you also have really good infrastructure. So that balance offers a really unique value proposition in the world today. And this is one of the things that I think is generally important. I'll talk in a future video a little bit about UAE, because there's been lots of different online stuff and people are messaging me about it, etc. So we'll do a video covering UAE and kind of its place in the world at this point in time in the future. But what I really like to do is to sort of try and be ahead of trend, right? And this goes for many different regards, but one of those ahead of trend things happens to be places to visit. And the sort of Gulf Peninsula or general area around there, so for example, Socotra, highly under-visited, most people aren't aware of it, etc. But like super interesting natural beauty, tons of different variety of animals and plants that you wouldn't get otherwise. Like, these places they're kind of still undiscovered. And there's something really cool about going to the places that are kind of undiscovered before they're undiscovered. I remember going to Cappadocia when it was like kind of early in the Cappadocia discovery phase. And, really awesome to go to those places before they get expensive, before they get so much crowds, before they get all these sorts of things. And so I would encourage you to come and check out Saudi while that is still the case. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Saudi because it is a rapidly changing place. So let's just consider that there are some amazing places to visit and check out, and that number is increasing rapidly here. But they just opened for tourism in 2019. Prior to that, aside from religious tourism, which obviously Mecca and Medina and kind of the whole religious pilgrimage stuff in Islam, it's a big deal for a very long time. Aside from that, for foreigners to come and just explore the country was a very limited thing. And they've obviously taken this dramatic turn, and they're implementing all sorts of policies really quickly. They've got this Vision 2030 thing that they're moving forward. And so in the process of doing that, they're increasingly expanding the rules for foreigners to engage in. First of all, it becomes easier to get visas, easier to get residence permits. That's very interesting. And second of all, it's becoming easier to invest in property. So at the moment, at the time that I'm making this, and this could change quite quickly. I sometimes have people who will message me and they'll say something I mentioned in a video, and I'm like, yeah, that's a video from like a couple years ago. Things have changed a little bit since then, unfortunately. So always continue to keep updated on whatever the latest things are. And if you have questions, reach out and contact us. At the moment, if you wanted to buy property in Saudi, foreigners can do that on a couple different residence permits. They don't need to have somebody else. They cannot own land. They can only own buildings. They can only own one property per person. It can be a maximum of 3,000 square meters, and it must be used for residential purposes, or else they need to go and do some sort of other investment. Now, unsurprisingly, I'm at some sort of a resort here at the moment, and Of course, there are all sorts of major resort developers who are coming in to go and build places. And my guess is the opportunity in that space right now is probably really, really high. I'm not totally sure about that. I haven't kind of looked into all the specific details. But essentially, if you look out behind me, as far as you can see up to the rocks is basically owned by one resort. And that's, it's a pretty reasonable sized property. It's like very, you have a lot of peace between the different villas, etc. Very, very cool. It would be difficult to get this in a lot of parts of the world. And my guess is they probably didn't pay that much for the land. And over time, they're probably going to add more and more different facilities, etc., and it's going to grow out, and that's going to be a fairly big deal for the area. So I think there is a lot of opportunities that are worth looking at in this part of the world at this point in time. As with any of these things, the devil is always in the details, so you have to kind of get in and figure out, okay, well, where and what are the relationships and what is the permitting and that sort of thing. However, the thing that I think is quite interesting is they have announced in 2023 that they're going to be further expanding the opening of what foreigners can own. So at the moment, for example, GCC citizens are able to own property more than foreigners who are not GCC citizens. They can own up to 3 properties, similar size restrictions, etc. By the way, no ownership at all is allowed in Mecca and Medina at the moment. We'll see how some of these things change with the new rules, because they've kind of announced the new rules are coming in, but they haven't announced exactly what those rules are. But I think most people don't realize what sort of natural beauty and unique locations exist in some of these places that have yet to be discovered, right? And so again, I give the example of, this is Alula. To give some context, this area, although it was inhabited for thousands of years, basically by the same people who built Petra in Jordan, in spite of the fact that that was the case, they only discovered ruins in 2002 through 2014, and they most recently discovered some in 2019 in what became the first UNESCO World Heritage Site in Saudi Arabia. And so that's kind of interesting, right? You kind of like, this is an unusual situation where you're like, oh, hey, this whole, like, there's all these tombs, there's all this sculpture, there's all this stuff, and we only discovered that in 2002. That's like pretty interesting. So I suspect that you will find there is more of that sort of thing. And my thesis fundamentally is that if you can take advantage of investing in a place early, you can get some really beautiful places that you can participate in. And I've mentioned before that I think from a real estate standpoint, there's a big opportunity to have these very unique properties, because I think in a world of global interconnectivity and Instagram, etc., a lot of people are going to see these unique places, and as a result, you can get a really asymmetric upside to those very specific niche spaces if you're somebody who's interested in doing them. We see it a fair bit in Bali, although Bali at this point in time is getting pretty overbuilt in terms of, like, there's a lot of those places now. It's not like just 1 or 2. There's tons of places that people built that are really wonderful. You see something similar in various areas of Mexico, Tulum, etc., and so on and so forth. But I do think there's a big opportunity for that for anyone who's interested. In addition to that, there's a lot of investment going on in Saudi and by Saudis, by the Saudi government, etc. I've had a number of clients who are either Saudi or are people who are doing business in Saudi tell me that the opportunities are really great. It's not something that I've really delved into and explored too much, but they say that's really the place to be right now. And I think that a lot of people have these sort of outdated views of what the world is like, where they take a look and they say, oh yeah, but isn't that place like this? And it's like, well, that might have been true 30 years ago, but it might very much not be the case today. So anyway, I would encourage you to come and check out Saudi Arabia from a just tourist standpoint. I think it's really beautiful and really underrated, and you can get a wonderful experience there. From an investment standpoint, I think it's worth exploring. I can't give any specifics in that regard because I'm not sufficiently versed in the marketplace, but I think that it's one of those sort of early frontiers. You can kind of think to yourself of, like, okay, I could go to Albania, and Albania, you can get relatively cheap property. You have been able to for quite a while, and okay, great, there's a nice coastline, etc. But, what you get with that, the baggage is, hard to justify going there versus Croatia or something like that, right? And Saudi right now has just really, really unique value proposition. So let me know if you have any questions, comments, put them in the comments below. And if you are interested in help with relocating to other countries, if you're interested in setting up international structures and banking and all that sort of thing, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message through offshorecitizen.net. I will look forward to seeing you all on the next video.